Stories from eternity.
In 1976, an academic journal called Anthropologica published a paper with a dry, forgettable title, Wechuge and Wendigo, a comparison of cannibal beliefs among the peoples of the boreal forest. It was written by an anthropologist named Robin Ridington, who had spent years living with the Dane-zaa, the Beaver people of the Peace River country in northern Canada. Academic papers about monsters are common. Folklore studies fill entire libraries. But this paper was different, because the monster in it had a name, and a date, and victims, and Ridington had sat across the fire from people whose own parents had been killed and eaten by it, within living memory. This is not an old story. That is what you need to understand before we begin. The Dane-zaa called the thing Wechuge. It is pronounced Wechuge, and it is not a creature that comes out of the forest. It is a person. It could be anyone. It could be the man sitting next to you at the fire. Here is what the elders explained patiently to the anthropologist who wrote it all down. Long ago, in the time before this world settled into its present shape, there were giant animals. Enormous, cunning, powerful things that hunted human beings for food. The giant animals were defeated and shrunk down into the small animals we know today. But their power did not die. It went underground, into the world, into dreams. And sometimes, a person carries a piece of that old power inside them. Among the Dane-zaa, this was not evil. It was medicine. A child alone in the bush on a vision quest might be found by one of the ancient animals, the frog, the spider, the wolverine, and given a gift of its strength. That gift made you a better hunter, a stronger person. But every gift came with a rule, a taboo, one specific thing that the carrier of that medicine must never do, or see, or hear, for the rest of their life. And the rules, as Ridington recorded them, sound almost absurd. A person with one kind of medicine could never eat meat that flies had touched. A person with another could never have their picture taken with a flash. And a person carrying the frog, or certain other powers, could never listen to the sound of a stretched string or a stretched hide, which means a drum, or a guitar. Break the rule, and the old giant animal inside you begins to wake up. The Dane-zaa had a phrase for what happens next. They said the person becomes too strong. The power grows past what a human body can hold. The person's heart turns to ice, and the ancient hunger comes back, and the ancient prey of the giant animals, as you remember, was us. The person becomes Wechuge, and the first sign, the sign the elders taught their children to watch for, is one of the most horrifying details in any folklore on earth. The person eats their own lips. They chew them slowly away so that their teeth are always showing, a permanent smile of exposed teeth in a face that still belongs to your uncle, your neighbor, your friend, while whatever is left of them freezes solid behind it. Now, here is the story the old people told, the one whose survivors the anthropologist met. In the late 1800s, in the Peace River country, there was a man named Wechuge. The record does not say which rule he broke. It only says what he became. Wechuge turned Wechuge, and he killed and ate members of his own community, and then he went into the bush, and he stayed there. The people Ridington interviewed in the 1960s and 70s were the children of his victims. For them this was not mythology, it was a family memory, the way your family remembers a house fire or a war. But there is a second story, and this is the one I cannot stop thinking about. Because Ridington did not only record history, he witnessed something himself. In the 1970s, at a gathering, in a world that already had trucks and radios and electric light, It happened at a community hall. There was a crowd, and there was music. Modern music played on instruments with stretched strings. And in that crowd there was an older man who carried an old medicine with an old rule attached to it. The music was the one sound in the world he was never supposed to hear. And in a crowded hall with amplifiers, there was no way not to hear it. The people near him noticed the change before he said a word. He went still, his face emptied out, and then, quietly, underneath the music, he began to sing, not the song that was playing, his own song, his medicine song, the song of the ancient animal he carried, a song some of the older people around him recognized and had hoped never to hear sung in that way. And as he sang it, he began to move his jaw, slowly, working his teeth against the inside of his mouth. He was starting on his lips. Think about what the people in that hall were facing. There was no monster to fight. There was a respected elder sitting in a chair, humming and chewing. A doctor would have called it a stroke or a breakdown. The people who knew him knew better. They knew exactly what was happening, and exactly how far it went if no one stopped it, because their grandparents had buried what was left of Wechuge's victims. And they knew one more thing, the old knowledge, the kind that sounds like nonsense right up until the night you need it. A Wechuge's heart is ice, old ice from the floor of the old world. Bullets do not warm ice, knives do not warm ice. In the oldest stories, when a Wechuge was finally brought down, it took the whole camp to wrestle it into the fire, and they held it there all night, and in the morning there was no body in the ashes, only a wide wet stain where the ice had melted, and a smell of old, dead water. But you do not have to burn a person whose ice has only begun to form. You can melt it from the inside. So that night, in a community hall in the 20th century, the people did the old thing. The music was stopped. The elders took charge, calmly, the way you are calm around someone standing on a ledge. They heated fat, hot grease, the richest and warmest thing the old world knew, and they brought it to the man who was singing his animal song through bleeding lips. And they fed it to him, cup by cup, hot grease, into a body turning to winter, while the old people spoke to him, and sang to him, and called him back by his human name, hour after hour. By morning, the singing had stopped. The man was weak and sick, and himself. The ice had melted before it reached his heart. The community had killed the monster without harming the man, which is a kind of victory almost no other folklore on this planet even imagines. Ridington published all of it. The taboos, the songs, the grease, the man in the hall. You can find the paper today in the journal archives, and his books about the Dane-zaa are still in print. He did not present any of it as a curiosity. He presented it as something the Dane-zaa understood about human beings that the rest of us have forgotten. Because strip away the giant animals and look at what this belief actually says. It says that inside an ordinary person there can be a power that is genuinely dangerous. It says that the danger wakes up when a rule is broken, sometimes a small rule, sometimes by accident, sometimes through no fault at all. It says the transformation begins quietly, with a person going still and cold and turning into someone their own family does not recognize. And it says that the only cure, the only one, is other people, a whole community, refusing to look away, holding the person by the fire until the ice melts. The Wendigo, the famous cousin of this story, is about hunger and winter. The Wechuge is about something worse. It is about the fact that the monster does not come from the forest. It comes from inside someone you love. And the forest people of the Peace River country decided, generations ago, that when that happens, you do not shoot, you do not run, You warn them all night if you have to, but the old people would want me to finish with the warning, so here it is. Somewhere out in the bush beyond the Peace River, according to the stories, Wechuge was never caught and never burned, and things made of old ice do not die of old age. So if you are ever at a gathering in the North Country and the music is playing, and you notice one person sitting perfectly still, look at their mouth and pray they are only humming.